You're listening to Paris: A State of Mind on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris: A State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Lokim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Hello, everyone in podcast land. We are back in the studio, and we're continuing on with the season finale of Paris: A State of Mind, finishing up with Denise Powers, a very good friend of mine. And I'll tell you a little bit about Denise in a minute, but it's still going to be our series about what it's like living in your area. And funnily enough, Denise and I are practically neighbors. We could practically, if we tried to think about it, we could probably somehow manage to see each other's buildings if we climbed on top of each other's buildings, but we might not want to do that. Anyway, Denise is a writer and a director whose most recent short film, Un Mec Gentil, finished its festival run, and it's available to watch on Vimeo. At the end of all of this, Denise is going to give you details on how to contact her. And she's currently working on 2 other short film projects, as well as a feature-length adaptation of a novel by Christina Schwartz. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you, Gail. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay! I'm happy to have you here too. So, I mean, it was a little bit of a spoiler if people know me as far as what we're going to talk about today. But for those that don't, what arrondissement do you currently live in, Denise?
I currently live in the 18th, but I'm really on the frontier of the 17th and the 18th. So, yeah.
Is that like the Wild Wild West frontier?
It is. It is. It's really, you feel like you're on the edge there. It's great.
And what's your closest metro station?
The closest metro is Guy Môquet, which is on line 13, which is, not a strong selling point. As you know, I don't know if are we allowed to name particular metro lines?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to slander any metro lines, but yeah, no. When I took this apartment, I knew that particular metro line was going to be a challenge. But fortunately, because I live, you live behind the Butte, right, behind the Butte Montmartre. And I live kind of to the side of it. And so I kind of like that because that means I can fairly easily get down in a couple of stops to Place de Clichy. It's maybe a big 10-minute walk or short 15-minute walk down there and escape the problems of line 13 and also line 14, which comes up much farther than it used to. So that has been a real godsend during the strikes. So if I just walk 15 minutes, I can get on line 14 and I've got clear sailing into the middle of the city.
That is very convenient. Yeah, it's really great how they've expanded. That's to the, about a 15-minute walk to Pont Cardenay stop on line 14.
For me, actually, it's Porte de Saint. Where is it? It's the next one after that. Is it Porte de Clichy? I don't know. I just go.
Anyway,
I just go. I have like a homing device, and I just kind of.
Well, suffice it to say, actually, we'll call your metro stop Guy Moquet because that's really what it is. You fall out your door into Guy Moquet.
I do,
whether you like it or not.
I do. Yes.
And why did you choose to live in the area that you do? Was it just a matter of the apartment that you found, or was it an area that you chose to be in?
A little of both. So just to preface that, I've lived in a lot of arrondissements. So, I've lived in the 11th. The first year I moved here, I moved 5 times. And so...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I've always been a right bank gal. And so I started in the 11th, which I loved. And then I moved to the 12th, which I really liked a lot too. And then I moved to the 19th and the 20th. And then I settled in the 10th for quite a long time and then moved back to the 20th. and then ended up in the 18th in like kind of the heart of Montmartre in the same building as a previous guest of yours, Lily. And we were there, I was there, she still is there, at the very, very top of Montmartre with a spectacular view of the entire city with, the Eiffel Tower right outside my window, as you remember. But then I left for a couple of years and I moved back to Paris in 2021. And when I had to think about where I wanted to live, I really wanted to move back to the 18th because I had roots there, I had friends there. And after the pandemic, I realized that was just really very important to me to have people I knew and people I was friends with nearby. I don't think we're going to have another lockdown or something like that. But, going through a period where, we couldn't go more than a kilometer away from our homes. What if I were in some part of the city where I didn't really have any close friends or didn't really have any associates? It would be horrible, right? So I wanted to make sure I wanted to be back in the 18th, to be within, striking distance of various people that I know. It just makes life so much easier, right? Like you can kind of put together a last minute apéro. You can just do things that it's not a big project that you have to get on the metro and go 45 minutes and then, go home. And, there's that certain inertia. And so for me, coming back to the 18th was a logical choice. And I didn't really want to be back in Abbesse because as much as I liked my apartment there and I liked living in Lily's building, I didn't want to live in a neighborhood that was a destination. I find that not pleasant because it's particularly... Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I don't know. I didn't feel like I could really get to know the merchants and things like that. They just kind of saw me as another foreigner, another kind of tourist, and I didn't like that.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that because it's true. It's not the same feeling around Guy Môquet.
No, not at all. It's like a different world. I mean, technically, it's the same administrative district because even Montmartre the 18th is separated into a number of different administrative districts, and the whole République de Montmartre is, has very, very distinct identities depending on which side of the butte that you're on. And technically, I'm in the exact same one that I was before, but it's really like a different world. And even though I liked being in the heart of Montmartre, especially at night, because by 9:00 the tourists were all gone, and then you had this kind of like magical place all to yourself. But for day-to-day life, I preferred to be where I am now, and I like. Lily talked about the hill. When I took that apartment, people would say, "Oh, you'll get used to the hill." And you never get used to that. No, the hill sucks. People arrive at your door completely out of breath, sweating. And they're like, "Oh my God, how do you do this every day?"
You want to take a shower before dinner?
So I kind of like being at the bottom of the hill, and I didn't want to be right directly behind the hill because there are places that I like to go to in the 9th, and you can't walk through that hill, and you got to either walk over it or you've got to take the metro or go around it, right? So I'm on the side, and I like that.
And so, are you still feeling happy to be with your choice in moving in the area that you did?
Oh, I love it. What I love about Guy Môquet is if I walk 10 or 15 minutes in any direction, I'm in a completely different world. So, it's just a few minutes to Batignolles, which you talked about in a previous episode, which is, becoming very kind of, it's very family oriented. Yeah, it's got a certain character, but it's got lots of neat little boutiques and kind of cool things. It's not become quite the destination that, for example, I used to live in the 10th near the canal. And when I moved there, it was really great. And it's still great, but it's become a destination. So all the small commerce, the little boutiques and independent artisans and, just kind of holdover restaurants that were kind of, really catering to a local clientele, they were all kind of replaced with these kinds of destination restaurants and bars and things like that. And once you have tons and tons of people coming into your neighborhood to drink and to eat, that, creates all these other negative externalities, of people. There's a lot of noise. There's people urinating in the streets. It's a real problem. So around here, it's not like that. We don't have massive amounts of people coming in from the outside. And so I can go up to Montmartre, go up to the Butte and visit Lily. I can, go to the areas around Clignancourt, which I like, which has a lot of commerce that caters to North African clientele or Sub-Saharan African clientele. So there's a real diversity of food and all kinds of things that you can get here. So I really like that.
I do like all the reasons that you said. Those are all the reasons why I like this area as well, too. But if you asked me, I've lived here since 2001. If you asked me when I first moved around here, when I first moved to Paris, if I would have said the same things about the Guy Môquet area, absolutely not. It has changed so much and it's really great. I thought that I loved my old apartment. You remember my old apartment on Square de Klingencourt, and I was hesitant to move into the building that I'm in now because it's more modern, but I just love the area so much, and it's so much more convenient actually than my old neighborhood, as you say, for getting to different places, different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nice mix of things, and it's I mean, I think it's great. So I'm happy with it. Wouldn't leave.
Yes, I agree. I love it too. Can you tell our listeners, do you feel that the area has a certain type of vibe? Is it best suited, for example, to couples, families, swinging singles, or swingers? No, just kidding.
Well, I mean, I live right up the street from an S&M dungeon, so maybe.
Don't share all your secrets.
Yeah, don't ask me how I know that. No, kidding. No, I mean, I think that the 17th definitely caters to a lot of families, particularly in that area around the Martin Luther King Park. So that area really started to develop in the early 2010s, I would say 2012, 13. All of those new buildings went up. They redeveloped, I think, a bunch of brown space or something. It's like a brownfield redevelopment. And they created this lovely park. And where there are parks, there are families who live around them, right? Because it's great to have that green space for the kids. And so there's a lot of new development there, and that's heavily family oriented, I would say. Then in the area where I live, I'm right at the metro stop. So I literally am on the frontier of the two arrondissements. So it feels like a frontier area because when you go on one side, it's the 18th, and then you go on the other side and it's the 17th.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I hate to say it does feel different. I don't know what it is, but I mean, even the 17th though, it's wide, right? So there's part of it that feels like the 16th. And, right? You come up from the metro at Wagram or Tern and you're like, oh God, I'm underdressed for this. And then there's this end of it, which is much cooler, right? And much more relaxed and much more working class. And, but it is gentrifying, right? So that's part of what I think you're saying about the transformation since 2001. So.
Mm-hmm. So it's probably still a big working class area, I think, by and large. There are a lot of elderly people, but I feel that there's also quite a lot of young people. And I think partially because it's a part of the 18th where prices are a little more affordable.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And certainly the part of the 17th across the street from me is the most affordable part of the 17th, an area called Épinette, which is, again, historically, it was more of a manufacturing area, and it, later sort of developed into more of a residential area. There are a lot of tightly packed residential areas there. So it's really a combination of everything. I wouldn't say it's any one thing. But what I do like about living in the quartier populaire, is that it's a rhythm of life that it's more familiar to me in a sense. Because if you go to places like the deep 14th or the 15th in the summertime, or everything is much more dominated by the rhythm of the vacances scolaires, right? So if you're there in August, there's just not a soul anywhere. It's just really like a ghost town. And even, during the long weekends in May and during the vacances scolaires in winter and in spring, there are just, portions of the city that really just almost die because everybody just takes off, everybody leaves. And here I would say it's not dominated by that. It stays animated throughout the year and people are here and it's I don't know, I like it.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris, A State of Mind, you may also be interested in our sister podcast, Romancing in Paris. Join Lily as she shares her secret and some not-so-secret spots for lovers and lovers of Paris. And now back to Paris, a state of mind. Unlike some people, I actually love Paris in August. It's one of my favorite months to be here. And contrary to what everybody thinks, not everything does shut down. And I do agree that our area, there's a lot of shops, restaurants, so on and so forth that are open. And people are closing less and less as well. I feel like instead of originally you would see maybe somebody closed for the whole month and then it was maybe for 2 weeks. Sometimes now they'll take a week off and sometimes not at all.
Right. Maybe that's not a good thing. I don't know. But I do feel that, in August, things calm down a bit. And you feel the difference in February, right? You feel the absence of so much traffic and, so many people on the metro. And you do feel that, which is nice. But what I'm saying is like, there are certain parts of it which are really completely devoid of people during certain times of the year. And that's not as pleasant. That makes you feel a little bit like you're left out of something if you happen to not follow exactly those same rhythms in your life. So,
and I guess, is there something that you wish you knew about the area that you live in now before you moved there that maybe our listeners should know, apart from line 13?
No, I mean, I went in eyes wide open on that one. I mean, I really would not have wanted to live on line 13, but, that's the way it goes. And it really has not been as horrible as I had imagined it to be. So that's good. I guess, to answer that question, I'd go back more to my early days, when I was moving around and, you just have to kind of think about like what your life needs are, right? So like, this is not, you have to think about like your green space needs, your exercise needs. I'm in the midst of trying to get Pickle Ball places established in Paris. And that, that's been a real challenge. But we do have a terrain near you, actually on Championnet, where a group of us is, trying to, rent the tennis court and like put up a net on the sly, when we're able to rent the court. So that's something to think about too, like what kinds of like resources you had. You had a guest who has dogs. This is not like an ideal arrondissement for dogs. Like when I had a dog, I did like being closer to Bois de Vincennes, at a place where I could take the dog and get on the metro and do that. So it's not recreational facilities. Green spaces are not evenly distributed throughout the city. So that would be something that people would maybe want to think about if it's important to them.
I think that's a very good way of looking at it, to look at, as you say, your needs of what's important to you when you look at an area, not just simply look at that area.
Yeah. Every place I've lived, I've loved for different reasons, and so there's things that I miss about. I miss having my splendid view, right? But, the view isn't everything, right? Because living there, I had a view with a room, right? Like I didn't, it was a tiny, tiny apartment. And really what I was there for was the view. And you can dine on that for a really surprisingly long time. But at a certain point you say, I want to be able to do yoga in my apartment without hitting the walls, right? So I'm able to have a slightly larger space down here at the bottom of the butte, and that's nice. And it's accessible to the things that I want to go to, and it's within striking distance of my friends, including you.
Woohoo! And so here's my big final question that I ask everyone, and it's kind of interesting since you've lived in so many parts of the city. So you've got your magical fairy apartment godmother that comes down and says you can live anywhere you want in Paris and you can have any apartment that you want. What would it be and where would it be?
Oh, I need that fairy godmother with a nice deposit to put on an apartment. I think you're going to have a hard time getting rid of me, Gail. I mean, I think, I think I'm here. You're stuck with me. So, yeah, I mean, I do look, I sometimes stop and, one of the kind of spectator sports here in Paris is drooling in front of the real estate agencies, just looking at all the different things for sale. And it's funny, you see everybody doing it. And
yeah,
I can't imagine everybody's in the market for an apartment. I think everyone, it's just like what you do. You stop and you look at these apartments and how much are they selling for and how much are they renting for. Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably look to buy somewhere either in the 17th and Epinette or in the 18th, because like I said, This is where I have people. This is where I've set down roots. And even though I think the 11th is great, I think the 10th is great. And I lived in the 10th for like 5 years. So, I had a pretty good network there, but, it's at this point to move back there would be like kind of moving to a new place.
And what type of apartment? Like, would it be a modern apartment, an old apartment? What type of apartment would you want from your fairy apartment godmother?
What I really would love, and that's one reason I like where I'm living now, is I love these interwar buildings. The brick ones, many of which were built to be social housing, and many of them still are social housing. Especially there's a big development on Rue Poteau in the 18th. There's another one, between us, like on Rue Marcadet. They're quite large developments, and they're brick buildings, so they're very distinctive in Paris. And I like them because they are well built. They are old enough to have like some design details with charm, with, I have like arched doorways. I have, one of those little, cool pantries, the garde-manger, the marble floors,
I love your floor. Your floor is spectacular.
Yeah, it's a nice floor. And so, so I like those kind of like little details that make it charming. And yet at the same time, because they were built, after World War I, they had already kind of some modern sensibilities, so it's not quite some of the downsides that you have living in a Haussmannian building. So I really, that would be my ideal, is to live in one of these. Buy a place in one of these.
You kind of probably wouldn't want to move.
I'm trying to figure out how I can like dislodge this apartment from the person who owns it. Like, do you have that's what you need to do, is you need to do an episode on like how renters can like coerce their owners into selling their apartments for a favorable price before they go on the market. That's what you need.
Well, I'll talk to Marie about that and see if next season we might do that for an episode.
Exactly. What sorts of nefarious things that we can do that would make the owner think it's actually their idea to sell the apartment.
You never know. Well, thank you. That's all been really great, Denise. And I really enjoyed our episode together. Also, because we're talking about my area as well. And I might just tell the listeners, because they may not understand in terms of geography. You live on a street called Avenue de Saint-Ouen, and you were mentioning that it's the 18th and the 17th, and it's true, because literally that street is the dividing line between the 18th and the 17th at that particular point. When you get down to the boulevard, then you get into the 9th. People need to, if you look on a map of Paris, they'll be able to see how the dividing lines of arrondissements happen. There's always a street that is literally the frontier between two arrondissements.
I mean, like, one thing I didn't mention is just it's so well served by commerce. Like I don't know if you orient toward that corner there, but there's, the cheesemaker, there's the flower shop, there's all the primeur, the vegetable people. There's even a horse butcher, which, like, I've never eaten horse meat, and I don't really want to eat horse meat. And but like, there's something about the horse butcher that makes you feel like you're like, okay, this is definitely France, right? This is not something I'm going to find anywhere. It's kind of nice to have what I would say is this traditional kind of commerce. And, and when you go in and, that's right across from the halal butcher. But, I'm able to have nice networks with my merchants. And it's nice to feel like when you go in, they know who you are. And
yeah,
it's really cool.
Well, thank you again, Denise. And what I'd like you to do before we leave is tell our listeners how they can find you, maybe find some of the work that you've done and so on.
Yes, sure. You can find me on Vimeo. And then you can also find me on Instagram, and I'm just like verifying my handle because I don't remember it. It's D Powers Film, all one word. Feel free to go ahead and follow me there. I'm also, I forgot to mention, I said I'm establishing Pickle Ball here in the region. I'm also on the communications committee for the French Pickleball Federation. So if there's any pickleball people out there who, feel free to reach out and get yourself on the list to find out some opportunities to play coming up at the rentrée in September.
Well, thank you again, Denise. And I guess we'll probably see each other very soon.
I suspect we will.
Take care and have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Paris, A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Loquim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris, A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris, A State of Mind was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.